We're in another week of spring and things are looking a little better and a little different. Some more of the new crazy changes of 2023. Some are anticipated. Some is kind of shocking. A couple of things going to go over is, the big three in Taiwan that produce majority of the bikes that hit the United States. They reported their first quarter numbers. Also, I got some local news about a bike shop here, truck stores. They're consolidating. So let's dive into these subjects and talk about it a little bit more after this.
Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with a guy. This is As the Wheel Turns, So Do Days of Our Rides series. I will be covering topics of the industry as well as consumer views with my 30 years experience.
If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Welcome to another installment of As the Wheel Turns, So Do the Days of Our Rides. Hi, welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin the guy, taking my 30 years experience and giving you some insights of what I kind of notice, what's going on in the industry world that I live in, that kind of thing. So first thing we're going to dive into is the broader industry, where you got the big three in Taiwan. You got Giant, Adele, and Merida. Those are the three main manufacturers that produce the majority of the bikes that hit stateside and elsewhere across the world. Like Trek, Specialized, Giant, of course, which is kind of weird because they are themselves, whatever. Been in the 90s, whatever, and they're still doing it today. In Canada and so forth. So you got these major brands being produced back over in Taiwan. So first quarter earnings have shown that Giant and Ideal are down, and not really a shocker. And also Merida was up, but their profits were less. So they didn't make as much money. In other words, they're just pushing inventory out, they're lowering the prices. So this is where you're indicating a readjustment or correction from the 2020 inflated numbers and so forth. So that's just another extension of like, okay, and these orders were done like months ago. So it's not like they can just like, oh, our numbers are down because of whatever. When you're manufacturing, you got those orders in, and what gets produced and what you make or what's going forward is reflective of what's going on in the marketplace. So Trek and Specialized and Canada and those other companies are pulling back on their orders and quantities, maybe narrowing their SKUs, and bullet pointing on the items that are more hot and lessening the ones that are not, less volume, that kind of thing, in anticipation of, for us here it's been weather, but globally it's economy. So you got those things changing. More of the same, kinda, but I think it's more of a readjustment, which actually is a benefit for you and me as a consumer. That actually makes the manufacturers not actually leading the narrative. They're going to actually have to go back to the customers and go, what are you wanting? Oh, we can make that. And the price that you're looking for, or tangible. Because the rest of us are kind of like paycheck to paycheck, trying to, we're not going to be spending big dollars on a whim, thinking like, oh, we can pay that off in a couple months kind of deal, because our economy situation is kind of sucky right now. So we are anticipating a kind of a little bit longer struggle, as well as retail industry. So hopefully you'll see better products, better price, and the quantity is going to be there to be able to support. A little more predictive, which is great in the sense that you're not going to walk into an empty showroom floor again, unless they're going out of business. So anyway, that's interesting news for the global market. You can look up all the numbers and see the percentages. My perspective is more of, hey, my 30 years we've done this before in the 80s and the 90s. And it's just one of those things they just readjust. And are they going under? No, it's just those companies are just kind of softening their sales a little bit, or inventory, so they're more realistic, that kind of thing. Everybody wants to be up. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, business is business. Same here. But when you have slowing sales for at least 6 to 7 months, including myself on a micro level, you got to do adjustments. Period. I mean, either get better stuff or better pricing, you don't ask for so much, or you put more time and effort, marketing, whatever the case may be. Mostly, really, the bottom line is, again, listening to the customers, seeing what they're really wanting to buy or willing to spend their money on in times like these. Pretty simple, right? Now listen to the second one. Giant was in a big negotiation and investment into Stages. And Stages is a tech company that popped little sensors on your crank sense, which were pretty expensive, but it gave you all this wattage information, which was great. They were going to invest into them. And also, they do exercise bikes too. They had a plethora of different things. So Giant was going to invest into them. And this was kind of weird when they released that statement that they're going to invest in the Stages, is right after they did layoffs and cut back their vendor terms. In other words, I owe you money for buying all this raw materials to make stuff. Usually it's 68 days. Now I need 180 days or 120 days. So they doubled the length of paying people back, their vendors that go to the actual vendor, right? So, it's one of those things like they had to put the stop on that. But once the quarter came out, the first quarter numbers came out, Giant was like, we can't do the Stages thing. So they nixed it. So that's another article too. You can read it by, in Brain. It's just like, oh, that's not a shocker whatsoever. Anyway, so that's kind of the industry news. It's kind of like, for the global, going to back in time. We are going to go back in time for the local segment. Reason being, here in Fort Collins, Colorado, I used to work at a bike shop called Lee Cyclery after I worked at Parker Bikes at my parents' shop. So in the 2000s and teens, I worked at Lee Cyclery. Lee Cyclery they opened up in 1963. The main location was on campus. And nice old little building, kind of funky, right across from CSU College. It's one of those college towns, so if you're not familiar with Fort Collins. And it was crazy. And then they had 2 other locations. Well, when I first worked, they only had 2 locations. And when I worked there a little bit later, they opened up a 3rd location in 2008 or 2007. Anywho, they were acquisitioned or purchased by Trek about 5 years ago. And the Trek, that was one of the first Trek power grabs that they started buying shops across the nation. Now they have a whole bunch of shops they've been purchasing and opening as well, Trek corporate stores. Which is fine and dandy, whatever. I've talked about that before. But here's an interesting bit that I just found out this week is they're going to consolidating their stores. So their lease is up on the buildings that they are in now, which is owned by the person that sold them the bike shops originally. So they were, that owner did really well. He sold his bike shops to Trek, and he owned his own buildings. Like, okay, we're going to write a 5-year contract lease for these 3 locations. So they couldn't reach an agreement, so they didn't extend the contract. This is where the tricky bit comes in, and the very intriguing bit, because I was talking to customers the other day about this, and they live in closer to the north location. And both locations of Fort Collins are really nice because it's very bike accessible. You can test ride bikes and what have you and so forth. They're consolidating and going into a parking lot in Fort Collins where it's really busy. I don't think you can test ride bikes carefully or safely. So that's questionable what Trek is doing, is consolidating. Well, also consolidating means they're not getting enough sales out of both locations to support both locations in the staffing. So they're consolidating down. That's very interesting because that's one of those situations where are they going to be, it is one of their first acquisitions, so they obviously are doing a lot more smarter purchases, learning the last 5 years of buying all these other stores, but realizing they've bit too much off and they need to consolidate down. So, it's a combination of market, it's a combination of the state of the state, and, it's one of those things where retail space is expensive. It just is. And you need to support that. Also, I don't think they really had their head wrapped around being a college shop across the street from CSU, because that is a whole different animal. I worked at Big Five Sporting Goods back in the day, and they had a store that opened up from Washington, across the street from Washington State. And from taking that corporate model and trying to force it onto across the street of a college campus, didn't work. Those managers had to crumple it up and toss it and okay, we have to deal with this in a different way. And same thing with the bike shops, because it's not like the suburban mom and pop shop. It's not your corporate store shop. When you put it across the street from a college, you have to do things a lot different. It's a lot more service related. And it's an interesting algorithm, an interesting little place, because you got the poor college kids and needing their stuff worked on and buying things. Then you had a pretty, upper end scale neighborhood in that area too. So you had like both. It was just a nuts little shop to work in. But anywho, that's the big news here is like, unfortunately that location has been a bike shop since 1963. Now what's it going to be? Is there another shop going to move in? If you're a bike shop owner and thinking about expanding, there's some pre-laid out footprint ready to go. Both those locations. They also have one in Loveland too, which I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting depending what brands you have. That's right across the street from Shields, and Shields is one of Trek's big purchasers of Trek bikes. So you'd be up against a big giant Trek store. So anyway, interesting little tidbits about the local news here and purchasing. That just shows you even Trek as a retailer perspective is changing their shifts. So you'll probably be seeing that a lot in your neighborhoods. Not necessarily Trek, but possibly Specialized or Pond. Those are the big three, or even the bigger chains, that might have a bike shop that has multiple locations might be consolidating a little bit here in the next couple of years. Because what we're in right now is for the long haul. It's not just, we had this huge spike and we'll bounce right back out. That's going to be a slow and steady gradual pull out of this. And to get back to where 18 and 19 numbers were, and that kind of consistency and the blueprint that actually they can expect, anticipation and all of that, it might be a few years. So and also there's a whole big of e-bike push, and gravel bikes and some other things that kind of skew things in different directions. It's going to be interesting. It definitely has been a change, and some of it's been definitely for the positive, but the other positive outcome is like two things. One, the big corporations are going to listen to the customers. And second, your local shops or retail-owned shops by corporate stores, guess what? They're going to listen to customers again too. So they're not going to be driving the narrative anymore. It's going to be the customer that drives the narrative in a sense of what's being produced and the price points. So hopefully the price points come down, they're a little more realistic, and you get a little better products and a better mix of products that actually fit the customer base in those particular markets. Anywho, been doing this for 30 plus years. It's constantly change. That's my little gold nuggets of what I see for this week. On to the tech tips. We're going to dive into the crank set and how to take an old school square tapered crank set apart and be able to access that bottom bracket, take the bottom bracket apart and tools you'll need and put it all back together.